Superficially fashionable or no, I do think that the Coen siblings are extraordinary filmmaker visionaries. At times, I feel like they're too pompously dismissed by some cinema enthusiasts, either due to their mainstream acknowledgement, them being a staple of safely indie American coastal magazine staff writer, sterile neoliberalism, or, let's just face it, due to their espousing themes related to Jewish cultural living. It isn't worth denying. There was a certain university hovering clique which squandered the American Jewish cultural continuum, mainly related to revulsion at the actions of Israel's government. This was particularly true up to 10 years ago, at least from my perspective in Australia, which seemed to motivate unwarranted and snarky dismissals of the Coens, Woody Allen, for reasons not related to him being an unnerving creep, because other artists are wont to be excused for this if they're considered sufficiently trendy, or the films from David Mamet, his good works, before he became dully right wing, even 1991's Homicide, one of the most compelling English language films of the 90s, explores the concept of Zionism without remotely endorsing it or vilifying it, both. I think the Coens and most of their feature films are entirely magnificent. The only ones I do not care for are the ones which most of their loyal fans don't care for either. Hudsucker Proxy, Intolerable Cruelty, Lady Killers Burn After Reading, hopefully by now Hail Caesar, and maybe one day the vapid, pitifully pandering Buster Scruggs. I didn't check out Drive Away Dolls, I'm not sure I'd like to, but would love to view Tragedy of Macbeth at some point, and hopefully Honey Don't ends up being great. Sounds like it could be pretty worthwhile. On this channel, I've already discussed their late 2000s and early 2010s works, that is, No Country, Serious Man, and True Grit. This was due to me exploring some of the Best Picture winners and nominees from the 21st century and some of the 90s and 80s too, actually. And so naturally, I looked over No Country, Serious Man, and True Grit again. The former two, No Country in particular, are monumental efforts. And I quite appreciate the True Grit feature too, far stronger than a generally likable but rather basic John Wayne picture from the late 60s. Very recently, I uploaded the Barton Fink FOTD, and now we're at the rather brilliant and highly watchable debut, one of the better film debuts ever made, and that is the very well considered 1984 classic Blood Simple. On the point earlier, I ought to address the claimed dismissal of Jewish American filmmakers who focus upon supposedly Jewish subjects or themes. I don't say that as someone who disagreed with deploring the actions of Israel's government. Check out my video on Thoreau's recent The Settlers to hear me express my opinions on these issues for up to 15 long minutes. Although I never considered Jewish people to be representative of Israel, a lot of my cultural heroes were Jewish formatively. Not that I was aware of it or not necessarily, but well, depending on the medium and how young I was, from Spielberg and Kubrick, Kafka and Asimov, Kirby and Spiegelman, Chomsky and Ames. What a fantastic continuum that is indeed. T Rex's Bolan and Rush's Lee, Brooks and David, or Samson, or Christ himself. Being a filmmaker and an admirer of the medium, I owe a lot of apparent purpose in life to the exemplary creativity of innovative Jewish auteurs. And so it did perturb me that certain university upper class or upper middle class wannabe leftists had such a distaste for Jewish cultural self reflection. But you know what? It's them who are missing out. Blood Simple is an enrapturing exercise into neo-noir archetypes, Southern American, or Texan, urban gothic morbidity, twisted pulp tales of unforgiving dread, and whilst it might be genre tropes and cinematic tribute for its own sake, expecting to be celebrated simply for being present and noticed by prospective enthusiasts of the film medium, there's no denying that Blood Simple is intensely gripping, potentially one of the best applications of the amoral, noir, sleazy criminal pulped nihilism in the history of either cinema or in literature. Had Blood Simple been the synopsis of some considered novel, also published in 84, it would be plausibly celebrated as a dynamic arrangement of recognised narrative tropes in a more convicted, non-cynical, and very dramatically serious admiration for the modes themselves. As a film, it becomes even more fruitfully realised, for that pulp literary equivalent has not been continually critically celebrated within that medium as the post-war film noirs are for their own art form. This is evidently due to the visceral imagery and grand archetypes which partly defined the punchy, scenario-fueled, quasi-comic booky traits of those popular pulp novels, being far more suited for the cinema screen than for sprawling sentences within prose fiction. And so Blood Simple is not only a retroactively considered reimagining of those old noir tropes, but it does the best with it. More than most of those more yucky and likably unpleasant, grimy noirs that could not have been properly realised during the censorious epoch of the 40s and 50s. Blood Simple did not suffer from the belief that it was a lesser feature, not worth the same consideration or cinematic articulation as more lavish and celebrated cinema stylings. It approached the genre bracket from a perspective that considered those old works to be elegant, visceral works of art, and wanted to realise their finest, most impactful potential. And I think they really unequivocally did. It sits prospectively in my top 5 favourite Coen features, very possibly in the fourth place. It cost 1.5 million USD at the time, which would be the apparent equivalent of about 3 million USD now, which is to say, if a studio ever grants you what would still be considered a modest sum for a feature production, let the Coens debut empower you and inspire you. It is very possible to create a classic of such a, by comparison to the film industry around one, lower budget. It maybe is a little bit too genre-y and aware of film enthusiasts' liking of certain old tropes from American crime pulp cinema, but the film is so watchable that one brushes this aside. And I do know that some don't like these affably nihilistic murder romps. I think it makes for likable, shamelessly sensational entertainment, because the macabre may well one day be remembered as a vestige of a more frightening, unpredictable time, much as we assess media about the lives of those in historical time periods, whether it be Roman conquests, medieval barbarism, Victorian era upper class social cosmetics, or action thrillers set in the Second World War amidst death, suffering, and attempted mass exterminations. There is an inherent interest in the grisly realities of previous iterations of our societies, which is entirely benign and rooted in curiosity and a relief concerning the current cultural contexts. And I feel this way about a lot of, or certain examples of at least, violent and sordid media in general. It isn't that we want our society to be more violent. On the contrary, such media has us believing that, highly grateful that our world is not so violent as the ones in these texts. It is that we feel riveted by the historical morbidities of human existence, of how far we've come, and of what it might be like to have experienced such shocking, bloody danger. And I don't remotely think it is rooted in a want for a more violent ecosystem, or even motivating viewers to be subsequently violent themselves. It is odd that I can feel a relief and solace knowing that I can sit back and watch Blood Simple at any time. It can improve any day, because getting so absorbed in any film narrative, even one as callous and willingly graphic as the Coen's debut feature is, it is so enjoyably impactful and viscerally enriching that it motivates me to like this life a little more once the film's runtime's over, both due to the marvellous qualities of the feature itself, but also due to the fact that I don't live in a world really at all like the one presented in Blood Simple's hellishly abyssal, amoral, and terrifying Texas.